Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Lofty Golf channel. In today's episode, we are going to start a brand new playlist, and this playlist is called the Deep Dive Playlist. Essentially, what this playlist is going to be is a no excuses on length, very detail-oriented playlist based upon topics that aren't discussed very much because they're a little bit more complicated and things that aren't really talked about in a way that are understandable. So it's going to be my job in these deep dive playlists to talk about these things that aren't covered very much in a way that you can understand them. And again, they're not talked about very much, not because they're not important, but more because they're complicated. So it's a lot easier to say the ball goes really fast rather than talk about gear effect and vertical gearing and the different center of gravity locations and bulge and roll and the radius and the curvature and all that stuff. So in the deep dive playlist, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go in and we're going to talk about all of those things rather than just saying the ball goes fast. I want everybody to have a really good understanding of why the ball goes fast. So looking to educate you again, but in a different way than the other playlist, which is more geared towards fitting and the general audience. So again, if you're really interested and you want to nerd out on golf equipment, deep dive playlist. Okay, so to start the deep dive playlist, the first place that I thought we would begin is with gear effect. And the reason why we're starting with gear effect is because gear effect has a ton to do with everything else that I want to start off with the rest of this deep dive stuff. So as I started thinking through this, I really want to talk about club head design, and I really want to talk about bulge and roll and center of gravity and movable weights and all of that type of stuff. But in order to really understand why they do all that and why it works, you gotta understand the physics of it first. So the physics of it is all gear effect. And once you understand the physics bit, then you have a lot better understanding of why everything else works. So today we're going to talk about gear effect and center of gravity on club heads. Let's jump in. Okay, so to start off with gear effect, it's really important first to talk about center of gravity. I didn't really think that center of gravity was quite a big enough topic to give it its own video, at least for me. I feel like it'd be pretty short. I can explain gear effect in a couple minutes, where most of my videos are probably going to be a bit longer than that. So let's just jump into center of gravity now. I'll explain it and then we can get in really deep to the rest of gear effect and all that. So what is center of gravity? I'm sure you've heard it tossed around all the time. I'm sure that it's still somewhat confusing, but so here's what center of gravity is. It is that 3D point in space with regards to the three different axes, vertical, horizontal, and then in this case front to back this way. And it is where the mass is centered or positioned and where everything is going to want to rotate around. So it is sort of the main spot, if you will. So if it's going to receive a force, that is where it's going to want to rotate around. So if it receives a force and it's lined up with this middle point right here, and it receives a force off here, it's going to end up rotating. So that's what center of gravity really is. Again, to give you an idea of where these places are in the head, at least making them individually or marking them individually, front to back, you'll see all the time on different things to make it really easy to understand and nice shiny pictures and everything that it's like way back here, the center of gravity. They try and move it low and back, but the truth is it's not really back here at all. It's more like up here somewhere. That's still really good, and they play around with it, but again, it's not back here. It's somewhere up in this area. With regards to horizontal, at least with this driver, this is a 917 D3 from Titleist, so it is fairly centered, if maybe not even a little bit fade biased. But the center of gravity with this driver, you could say lines up with the little marker right here. It's in the middle of the face. With regards to the up and down, you don't actually see that move around very much at all. That's actually going to be almost always pretty centered too. You do see it move a little bit, but not a ton. All right, cool. So gear effect. Again, gear effect, I'm going to be talking about two different things. Remember that's the center of gravity, call it more or less here, in line with the face. and we're also going to be using strike location. So what gear effect is whenever the ball is struck away and not lined up with that center of gravity, it is going to twist the club head like we were talking about before. So if I have this ball and it strikes in the toe, what it's actually going to do is, for a right-handed player, it's going to twist that club head to the right. But then the gearing part comes in with what the golf ball does. So let's say that the ball hits again on the toe, the face goes to the right, and the ball, for simplicity's sake, this isn't what actually happens, will roll towards the center. So there's your gearing. See how it moves like that? It's like a couple of gears doing that type of a motion. So that's gear effect. And really what that creates is a ball that would start to the right, at least with this toe hit, and it would draw back to the center. So again, that's why they have bulge and roll. That's why they have movable weights and all that stuff. So that's why we're going to talk about this first, so you have a really good understanding of this first, and then the rest of clubhead design and all that stuff makes more sense. So before I even get any further into this, let's just jump off and get this out of the way real quick. The ball is not physically rolling on the club face. It doesn't stay in contact with the face long enough, but what it basically does is it imparts an axis tilt, and it will change the direction and the amount of spin that's created. So for purposes of simplicity, we will say that it will roll towards the center, and this is the gearing version that you'll see everybody talk about, but it doesn't really roll, but you know, for simplicity. So that's what the gearing is. And now what does each strike do with the gearing? So again, let's just start with the toe and the heel, and then we'll go from there. So if you hit it on the toe, depending upon how far on the toe or how far on the heel, if you hit it on the toe, it is going to point the face more to the right, and then it is going to also make the ball again roll towards the center and draw. So this is your push draw when you hit it on the toe. If you hit it in the heel, for a right-hand golfer, it's going to push that face to the left, and then the ball again is going to roll towards the center. You'll see a theme with that is wherever it goes, it's going to rotate around that center of gravity, which again is here. If you hit it there, it's going to rotate there around that center of gravity, trying to line up with it, with that direction of the force. And then it's also going to roll the ball towards the center. So what are you going to end up seeing? You're going to see a ball that starts to the left on a heel hit, and then it's going to curve back to the right. So that's your pull slice, pull fade. If you hit it on the toe, like I was saying, it's the exact opposite. That's your push draw. So moving on, let's do vertical. If you hit it on the bottom part of the face, you're seeing a lot of this talk now with clubhead design, and they're improving this, but if you hit it on the bottom part of the face, it does the exact same thing. It's this ball comes in. Again, the club is trying to line up the direction of the force with the center of gravity, so you actually see the club go down like this. And so again, the club will rotate down, the ball will spin up, and you'll actually see a ball that launches low and spins high. Again, when I'm done with all this, I'm going to throw a chart up here and I'll recap some of it. So hopefully you can just take a screenshot of that and use that. But again, one more time, if the ball hits towards the bottom, it's going to bring this whole thing down. It's going to also roll the ball up. So again, the ball is always going to roll towards the center, wherever you're hitting it. Think about rolling again. And then, as I'm sure you can assume by now, if you hit it towards the top, what happens is you hit it at the top, the club goes up like this, and then the ball rolls down. So again, the ball isn't really rolling down because it's always going to have backspin, but so what actually ends up happening is the ball just spins back less. So when you hit it towards the top is when you're actually going to get the least amount of spin. And again, that's really important for the future videos and the future episodes that we're going to talk about, but keep that in the back of your head. The further away you get from the center of gravity, the more it is going to gear. So if the center of gravity is here right by my finger and the center of the strike location is here, then it's not going to gear nearly as much as if you hit it here. You'll certainly feel it gearing in your hands, and that's what all that is. When you feel that shot and you feel it twist and curve really hard, that's what it is physically doing. You physically are feeling that whole golf club rotate and twist as you're hitting it. The most common strike is actually going to go across in this sort of a pattern across the face. You don't really see very many that are up here, and you don't see very many that are down here as well, but it's also important to note that these things work together. So I know I only talked about toe and heel and high and low, but if you hit it high toe, what it's going to do, it's going to combine those two effects. You're going to get a high launch, low spinning shot that also push draws. If you hit it low heel, what you're going to get is you're going to get a shot that starts low and spins more than normal, but it also pulls and it also fades. Keep that in the back of your head that these things all work together, and depending upon, again, how far outside of the middle of that center of gravity you hit it and it lining up, it is going to gear more or gear less. So I think the most important thing for a golfer to understand and be able to empower themselves with is the ability to understand what the ball flight is telling them. So if you pull the ball all the time and it fades all the time, it might not be your golf swing. It probably is, but it might not be completely from that. If you put a piece of face tape on here and you hit every single ball low on the heel, well, then at least part of that low fade or pull fade comes from strike location. Actually, a lot of people use this, and a really pretty famous example is Rory McIlroy. He actually uses it to his advantage. And this is really cool because he used to swing very into out, which produced a high draw naturally. And so what would happen is if he hit it up here high toe, that ball was going so far left and so hard left, it was not ever coming back. So what he actually ended up doing, and this is just through practice, I'm not sure if he knew this or not, he may have, but he actually learned to miss it more towards the heel. Because if he missed it more towards the heel, what that would actually do is that would actually straighten out his shot. So again, this all works in conjunction with what is already being used, right? So if you're already swinging and starting the ball way to the right, and your ball already naturally draws because you've got a closed face, and then you hit it on the high toe on top of that, it's only going to make it do more of that. It's only going to overemphasize and overdo what you already did. You probably had a pretty good face to path, but if you had a high toe hit, it's probably going to go too far left. With that being said, also, if you hit it on the heel and you had that in to out path with that closed face, it's probably just going to push. So remember, those things work together, and gearing is really important for sorting out what you're doing. All right, so thanks for sticking around today, guys. I really appreciate it. If you really enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you would throw a like down there for me. Helps big time. If you want to see all my videos and keep up with me as I keep posting them, subscribing would be really cool as well, even better. If you had a question or a comment, feel free to throw it down below. I'll try my best to get to them. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.